straight from the mayor's mouth, with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Straight from the Mayor's Mouth. Hello there, Matt. It's good to see you back in the country of good old Oz.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm actually very thankful to be here because it was a bit scary, our last flight landing into Dubbo.
Oh,
yeah.
Tell me about it. What happened?
Hot weather, obviously. So
Yes.
we've got very hot weather at the moment, incredibly hot weather.
Yes.
Bit of a heat
yes,
wave, as
absolutely.
everyone
You've got
talks
to step
about.
outside today and you'll feel that oven there cooking away.
Whew, yeah, and the flight was landing in the middle of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And they came down to land, and just as they're about to land, they've hit the power and took off again. So almost
kidding.
a touch and go, but they didn't quite touch.
So it's come in to land, like a normal landing,
Like a normal
and he's come in too fast or too slow or whatever, and he's hit the tarmac and bounced back up again.
He didn't quite hit, so he's come down, and obviously he's decided that things weren't in order, and
Wow.
then they've hit the power and taken off. And it's a more powerful feeling than a normal takeoff because you're coming down, so you're kind of descending, and then you've got to ascend and also obviously accelerate to get enough speed up to do that. So it really threw you back into the back of your seat, and the whole plane was dead quiet. It was a pretty full plane.
Right,
I'd say there maybe were 2 or 3 vacancies seats at most. So the whole plane was dead quiet.
My God.
And we're sitting there going, wonder what's going to
Might have
happen
been a
this
few
time.
Hail Marys full of grace.
Might have
Lord, be
been,
with
yep.
me right now, please.
And they've turned around, and the pilot said nothing for a while. And
Right.
they've kind of turned around because I imagine it's pretty full on in the cockpit.
Yeah.
This isn't a normal procedure they do every day.
Would a kangaroo jump out and cross the front of the path of the plane? Or
Well,
what actually happened? What
The
went
passengers
down?
knew nothing, so we're just waiting there going, hope everything's okay.
My
And
goodness.
as he's turned around and come back around, he finally, once they got up enough altitude, he said there was a bit of a wind change at the end just before they were landing, so they weren't happy with the landing, and so they've decided to go around again.
He
And
didn't
that's
have
when
the
it
L
gets-
plate co-pole in there saying,
Maybe.
mate, you take the first run of this and see how we go.
Maybe, because as we all know, when the weather's very hot, especially in the middle of the day,
Yes, the
heat,
thermals, yes.
the air's thinner, so you've got less lift capability from the air, so you probably have to go a little bit faster. I don't know the technicalities, but I assume that's all the case, so it makes it a bit tougher in the middle of summer. I do remember years ago I was on a direct flight from Dubbo to Canberra, and it was coming back from Canberra actually, similar time, maybe it was 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon,
Yep.
but it was pretty hot day, sometime around the end of January, and the plane was bouncing up and down all over the place. It was a smaller plane, and there were a few people screaming and doing and ahhing. So there was no screaming, there was no noise on this. It was just dead quiet.
Deathly
They've come
silence.
around, and that's when I think you'd be very nervous. And whether the other pilot then did the landing the second time around, whether it was
Give me
just
back those controls there, Jeff. I'll take the second run in.
maybe, who knows? So that's when your confidence might be a bit knocked around, and we've come down to land the second time around, and you could just almost cut the tension in the air with a knife.
Oh,
And we're sitting there
goodness me.
getting ready for the brace position.
with the finger sort of absolutely clawing into the side part there as you're about to land again for the second
Absolutely
time.
right. Yeah.
Oh, my
Anyway,
goodness.
they've landed the second time, and it did seem like to me that it was going much faster than a normal landing.
Okay, right.
But that might have just been because the tension was
Yeah,
heightened in,
that's right.
in the plane.
Something straight out of a Bruce Willis movie, mate. That's unreal. Yeah.
It did, and I actually felt like there was need for applause, but once they then started to slow down, it was a fairly noisy plane to be in, so no one clapped then. But then when they said welcome to Dubbo, I thought then applause might have broken out, and I was almost tempted to start the applause.
So everyone sort of got off the plane and started kissing the tarmac sort of thing.
Bought some lottery tickets.
Yeah, that's right, exactly.
And I talked to a couple of other people as we went off, and I said, so you ever had that before? And they went, no, I haven't had that one before.
I've never
So-
heard that before. No, that's amazing.
No, so it's a bit unnerving. And again, we've got a very good system in Australia. CASA has got a great reputation. Our airlines have got a great reputation. So you have confidence in the fact that this is a standard procedure. They would train for this scenario. Obviously, something wasn't right, so they've done it again. But when you're flying around up there, you're thinking, well, it's not as if they can just go somewhere else and land because it's hot everywhere. They haven't got enough fuel on board to say, we'll just hang around till midnight when it might cool down a bit.
That's right.
So you know you're going to have to try and get down somewhere.
Yeah.
And you're kind of sitting around up there, we can't stay here all day. But no, they turn around pretty quickly, all very professionally done.
Well, I'm so pleased to see you back here. You're back here with me talking about today's podcast. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Well, welcome back, mate.
Better than the alternative might have been.
Oh, absolutely. That's exactly right. Well, buddy, look, this is a really interesting one to sort of start off with today. An idea of yours that you sort of brought forward quite a while ago now was this whole idea of a REACT centre, which I'll let you explain in more detail, but it's the idea connects here to our renewable energy zone, where you wanted to sort of look at creating a bit like an educational centre, whereby to utilise what's happening right now in this whole new renewable energy zone. So it looks as though something's starting to happen here. This is no longer a pie in the sky sort of an idea. It sounds like there's some serious support for this.
And people laughed at me. Can you believe that? People laughed at me.
Fancy someone laughing at you.
Throwing around this idea. I actually started thinking about this idea because I was thinking about the CSIRO Parkes Radio Telescope, and I was thinking about the Snowy Discovery Centre, the Snowy Mountains Hydro Discovery Centre, and I thought, gee, that's great that they've got these visitor centres. So I started doing a bit of research on both of those. So the CSIRO Parkes Radio Telescope was opened way back on the 31st of October 1961, and of course it was made very famous when the moon landing, when it was involved in getting signals from the moon landing. They opened their visitor centre on the 14th of February 1969. So maybe
I love the way you just sort of throw out these dates, by the way. Very impressive of you.
Maybe that was in readiness for the fact that the moon landing was happening later on that year. But they obviously thought this is something that we think people will want to come along and have a look at. Now, it doesn't do much. The Parkes Radio Telescope can move, but you've got to stand there for a long time to see it move. So it just sits there. It's there, and you look at it and you go,
dish.
That's right. Wow, that's pretty cool. And then you're waiting for something to happen. So they built that, and now that gets approximately 100,000 people a year.
It's amazing, isn't
who
it?
come through that centre. That can be school students, can be general people just going through. I have heard feedback from the Parkes Council that it'd be great if the telescope was just a bit closer to Parkes, because when people go and visit the telescope, go to the Discovery Centre there, it's maybe not a direct relationship to then going into Parkes and spending some money at a cafe or doing some shopping or whatever. But it's still good for Parkes. So I looked at that and I thought, that's not too bad. Then we go back to the Snowy Mountains hydroelectric scheme. Now, that started way back on the 17th of October 1949. Took until 1974 before it was finally completed. So it was a huge project.
Yeah, massive undertaking for Australia. Yeah.
Exactly right. And they actually had an education centre there before they were even producing the first power out of the system. Now, I suspect part of that was because they had to convince Australians that this was a good idea, because it was all a bit new. Hydroelectric schemes were going in other parts of the world, famously around Niagara Falls. There was a hydroelectric scheme there. But here in Australia, it wasn't really known that well. So they had some areas, some centres there to try and educate the public. You've now got the Snowy Discovery Centre, which is in Cooma. And when you look at that centre, they get closer to 150,000 people a year go through there.
That's amazing, isn't it?
150 school groups go through there every year. So what a great thing for
I remember going there as a kid.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure if it's the same thing. They might have even updated it, because I remember going to the Snowy scheme when we were at school, but I don't remember if it's exactly the same one or if that's a whole new...
I remember seeing a big model, if my memory serves me correctly, a big model that sort of lit up like a Christmas tree at night.
And it was teaching you about hydroelectric power schemes. So what a fantastic concept. So I started thinking about this whole fact with the current whole area that we've got here in or just outside Dubbo with the Central West Arana Renewable Energy Zone. I need to come up with an acronym for that because it just seems so long and clumsy to say. And one of the things I thought of was out at Ningen, you've got a 102 megawatt solar farm, 250 hectares, and that was commissioned back in January 2016. But then in Nevertire, you've got a 132 megawatt solar farm, which is less area, 202 hectares, and they built a viewing platform at that one. Now, I remember when I first heard about this.
To go and look at solar panels.
Yeah, and I thought, who's going to look at that? Now, that was opened in December 2019.
Yeah.
I thought, no one's going to stand there and look at it, but they get people who go specifically
Is that right?
to stand on the viewing platform and look across the solar panels. Now, they don't move much either. They sometimes will move if they've got ones that follow the sun.
But it's different and it's fascinating in many ways.
It is
That's not something
fascinating.
you see every day.
So I thought if people are going to look at a dish, if people are going to look at solar panels, then maybe they'll look at a whole renewable energy zone. So that's when I started talking about this idea. Now, I came up with the concept initially of an acronym called REAC, the Renewables Education and Activities Centre. So I thought somewhere down around all our wind farms, solar panels, batteries, and there will be a hydroelectric scheme as part of that as well. It'll be more storage rather than producing electricity. I thought maybe there'd be something down there that you could do. So I started talking about this idea, throwing the idea around, and I thought you could teach people about renewables because the same as people didn't know about hydroelectric schemes back in the 50s.
Absolutely.
People don't really know enough about renewables now. The electricity market, how that works, a whole range of things of education. I also thought the A in there for activities would be good, because maybe you could then start to have a mini wind turbine that you could go up and have a look inside.
You were saying about abseiling down the side of it or something, eh?
Love it. Love
there
the
it
idea.
is.
So I've pitched this idea to a few different organisations, and I just want to start people talking about it. I'm convinced the way to make something happen is not to go and say, here's my fully completed 700-page document to go and make it happen. I'll give it to you now. Can you make it happen? It's like, no, it takes longer than that, and it takes a bit of sowing the seed and then watering the seed and then maybe fertilising the seed and then talking about the seed, and then the seed starts to grow. So I've been talking about this idea for some time. I've pitched the idea to Penny Sharp, for example, the relevant minister. I've pitched the idea to EnergyCo, who are building some of these transmission lines. I've just talked about it in general, and then I wrote my Mayoral column number 72, back on the 24th of May this year. I went into great detail about some of the ideas around that.
Right.
And then in October, Councillor Richard Ivey, the Deputy Mayor, and Councillor Dan Wellington, who's obviously very focused on getting something out of that, he said, well, I think we should formalise this a bit more. Let's get a business case. Now, some people, when they think about a business case, we've heard before where council spent $100,000 in developing a fully completed business case to try and pitch something. I don't think that's a good use of money. I don't think that's needed. And what Councillor Ivey wanted to do was just to get our staff to put some ideas together, high level, just to conceptualise it, rather than me just talking about it and writing a random Mayoral column, just to put a little bit more meat to it and give me something as the Mayor to go out and present to people that's a bit more formalised. So Councillor Ivey brought that idea forward as a notice of motion, and that's a resolution of council to create this idea and have some discussion with industry. We've changed the acronym ever so slightly. So it used to be a REAC we were talking about. We're now calling it a REACT Centre.
Oh, so with the T at the end.
A T at the end, and we've changed it a little bit. So now it stands for, we've taken the activities out because the abseiling didn't seem to be that exciting, but some other things might be important. Yeah, I know. Maybe we can still do it. But now it stands for Renewable Energy Awareness and Career Training. So it's REACT.
Oh, okay.
Centre.
So you've got a training element in this.
And this is the thing. We've got a bit of feedback. When I talk to some other companies about it, they would say to me, well, we do need somewhere to do training. We're going to need to teach people how to put together solar panels, how to work on wind turbines.
I can see why this is starting to take off. Yes.
That's right. And so the training side of it suddenly became much more significant. So that was back in October.
Right.
There's going to be a report brought back in December, so this month, about this. And I just wanted to find out from our staff how things are going, because they've got to develop a business case, but you want to talk to some people in the industry. Now, they've talked to Wellington Correctional Facilities, so the two jails down there in Wellington, Federation University, New South Wales TAFE, New South Wales Training Services, some of the proponents. So we've got companies like Tilt and Squadron and Lightsource, and I'll go back to Lightsource in a moment. You've got EnergyCo, Department of Regional New South Wales. They're all keen on it. I've actually had
big
a letter.
Players there.
They are, and I've actually had a letter from Penny Sharp, who's actually quoted the REAC, and I did speak to her recently and said, I love that letter you sent back with the REAC, but next time you send a letter, it's got to say REACT Centre, because it's changed slightly. But these different organisations are keen to see how they can be a part of it. And I think where we're going to get it across the line will be that training. But then if we can have the education and awareness, all the rest of it as part of it, activities maybe later on, maybe that's stage 2. But it's actually gathering legs quicker than I even thought it would. I thought this was something that would take some time to get going.
Where are we up to now?
Well, the business case will come back to council in terms of a overall high-level business case. And certainly our staff have looked at things like the Parks Observatory that I mentioned, and the Snowy Hydro Discovery Centre, and even the Royal Flying Doctor Service Visitor Experience Centre, that type of thing, and Siding Springs Observatory. So there are lots of different examples just in our patch of the woods.
Well, you go out to the airport out there, there's an abundance of training centres out there, aren't there? So Dubbo in its own right, and this region has become quite synonymous with being a great place to go for training.
Exactly right. So you've got all of those things happening. Where we're at the moment is it's still being developed, but there is a lot of interest there. So I think if we formalise that, it's probably a $4 million facility, thereabouts. But
is there any sort of funding available with this we can look at with state government? Potentially maybe that money that state government's talking about giving us, talked about last week on the last week's podcast, the $10 million there?
Yeah, certainly there's potential for that. But I actually think industry will be keen to do something with this, because they're spending money now. As we stand right today, they're spending money on training, having to send their staff somewhere to training. If they could train them somewhere near where the activities were occurring, that would be a cost saving for them. So I think the way we'll win some of those proponents over will be just by simple dollars. It's more cost effective to do that. Now, Light Source could be important in this. It doesn't have to be this way.
So who's Light Source? Who are
Light Source own the solar farm that's already there as you go across from Wellington to Mudgee.
Right.
There's a 200 megawatt approximately solar farm there, and there's a 400 megawatt, again, approximately solar farm that's being built. Light Source own those two.
Oh, okay.
They also own a bit of land around there, which used to be the old Soil Conservation Service. And so there's a building and a bit of land which probably would be a pretty good spot for something like a REACT centre.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't have to be there, and the whole idea of what we're putting together with our actual business case doesn't have to be there because it's high level. It's not saying at this location build this, but I suspect that Light Source, who have got a huge vested interest in this, might say, well, actually, we've got a bit of land that would be perfect. We might have even got an old building that we could use initially while we're building something new. Maybe do it there, and then other proponents might commit to some training there. They might help fund it. There might be a joint agreement. There might be a whole range of different options there. But once we get that business case, that'll be the step two. I was going to say step one, but I think step one is a bit of the discussion we've had. Step two will be, okay, we're progressing down this path. When you start bringing all these people in, then maybe you need somewhere to take them. And again, I think a lot of organisations and the government would be very keen to make sure people understand how these things, because there's so much misinformation out there, so many people with their conspiracy theories about things, just have some facts wrapped around it. I think that'd be fantastic. My dream with this is to bring 100,000 people a year to Wellington. What that would do to the Wellington economy would be quite incredible. Help the planet in terms of educating people about renewables, but also just that injection in the economy. That's the sort of long-lasting legacy we need.
Well, as Paul Kelly once said, from little things, big things grow. Now looking through this little one here, Matt, so I'm interested to see the fact that during the week the Wellington pool had to close. And the message came across through the media that there was an issue with I think it was something to do with a chemical imbalance, that they put the wrong chemicals in the pool or something happened. I'm not quite sure. I know that there's been some issues with the Dubbo pool, with the water slide not working down there. I know that only up until this week, the grass itself down there had grown significantly, and there's a new operating group that's in there, Belgravia. A bit of a big fan of the fact you only get one shot at a first impression, and their first impression right now has not been really impressive. Take us through it. What's actually going on with this group?
So if you go back a few steps, the Dubbo pool for many years was managed externally. The last council made the decision to bring it internally and run it internally. This council needed to make a decision about what we would continue to do. Do we continue running it internally where we employ the staff and run the pool, and we're talking about Dubbo Pool and Geary and Wellington, or do we go external? So we went through and did an analysis of that. We looked at all the options there. We asked for expression of interest. In the end, it was $400,000 cheaper to have it externally managed rather than internally managed. And there's a few reasons for that. Our expertise is not running pools. Finding someone who does have expertise in running pools makes sense because that's their specialty.
Now, these guys have got 200 pools or something, haven't they, across Australia and New Zealand as well, isn't that right?
Yeah, they've got about 220 or more.
Yeah. So they're not amateurs, they're professional people, these
That's
guys.
right. And I wasn't going to talk about the company yet because I want to go back one step just through the process where expression of interest, let's go and look at that. And again, you make a decision about whether it should be internal or external. Now, some of the reasons it was more expensive for us to run it internally was, again, we don't have an expertise there. Do we know the best way to run a pool? Well, we've got a manager at council that's responsible for a range of things and the pool. So that was hard. But the other problem we have, whenever council runs a business, it doesn't matter what the award is for that business or that industry, the local government award is what's used. So with a pool, for example, you've got staff that you need for 6 months of the year because you don't have the pool open 12 months of the year. And you've got to work out a way to employ those staff where they're working longer hours, longer days, more days of the week than they normally would, and then certain overtime is triggered, certain different wage calculations are triggered. So that makes it more expensive for us from that perspective, plus the fact that we don't have that expertise. And then what do we do with those staff for the other 6 months of the year? A lot of them are casual staff, obviously. Then you've got to try and recruit those staff for the next year. And so it's problematic, and you do question whether or not that's what we should be doing. So we went through that process and we made a decision, which is still the right decision. We went to an external contractor. And so we did that based on all the information we had before us, and we analysed those figures, and council, as in the councillors, made a decision to go external. And so again, that's a resolution of council, so I fully support that. Belgravia Leisure was the company chosen for a whole range of reasons, but some of the logic, I suppose, for councils when they're looking at it all, said if this company manages 220 plus pools in Australia and New Zealand, I think they cover every state and territory in Australia. I'm not sure about the ACT, but certainly Northern Territory, they've got venues.
Well, it's quite a resume. If you've got 220 pools, as I said, like they're a professional operation. They're a group that should know what they're doing.
That's right, and it's venues. So some of them aren't just pools, some of them are a bit different, but they've got 220 venues they're managing across Australia and New Zealand. So you think, well, they've probably got some idea on how to manage all of these, so that's good. We talked some other places that have Belgravia managing their pools, some other neighbours that we have.
And they're all quite happy with the operation that they were running?
Absolutely right. So all okay. So we awarded the contract to Belgravia based on a whole range of things, the cost factor being one of them, obviously their background, their performance experience. And it would be fair to say at this stage they haven't covered themselves in glory, and the community's a bit frustrated. And we absolutely hear that. Councils are hearing that. Our staff are hearing that. And so we're working our way through some of those problems, some of those issues. I don't think it means the decision was wrong. I'm disappointed with the performance of Belgravia Leisure, but I'm still not thinking the decision to go external is the wrong decision. You don't just decide that someone hasn't performed up to the right standard and that's it. Forget about that particular organisation or the concept of that organisation. The concept was still right. Now, the one with Wellington was certainly disappointing. They had a chemical-related safety incident, so they shut down the pool, which would be normal protocol. If that happened with Dubbo Regional Council managing the pool in Wellington or any other contractor, if the same thing happened, they would have to shut down the pool.
Does that mean the fact that they put the wrong chemicals in the pool, or what happened there?
I don't actually know the full details, and I suppose I don't want to talk about the exact details until I find out the full story, but I imagine there was probably a spill in the actual chemical room rather than putting the wrong chemicals in the water. But again, I don't have all the information to say definitely. But ultimately, there was an issue there, work health and safety incident. They shut that down, which is the correct procedure. The problem that I have is that I've said for a long time, communication is vital. So something happens like that, you communicate with the public, you communicate with council, but they did neither of those, which is a bit disappointing. We've been talking to them, the pool's now up and open again, but the next time, how are you going to get it better the next time? And so there's been some little issues. Dubbo's had some issues. They had some equipment failure. Again, it probably would have happened with that same equipment failure if it was managed by Dubbo Regional Council. So that's probably not the problem, but it's the way they're dealing with those problems. And you really judge an organisation by how they deal with problems. It's
absolutely
relatively easy for a business to open up and sell products and everything's going fine. The day they have a problem is the day you test out how good their procedures are and how things happen. And I take the example that we talked about before with a plane. A plane, you hope that an airline's got very good procedures and certain things happen, and so you do have an issue and it's handled and it's communicated and everything's okay because you've got confidence in their procedures. In this case, I'm a bit disappointed in their procedures.
So just in regards to that, is there a quality control process the council puts into place in regards to situations like this where you've got an external operator running at a council-owned facility? If
we take the caravan park, for example, we've got certain metrics. It's managed. We've got that externally contracted as well. We've got certain metrics in place. They've got to report on those metrics. They get that information back. And while things are running smoothly, that's a fairly simple process which doesn't take a lot of staff time. I got the reporting this month from the caravan park. That's been managed fine, and here are the numbers going through. Everything's okay. With this particular one, what we'll have to do in the short term is we'll have to step up that monitoring, which isn't great because that erodes away some of the savings that you're making in that particular contract. And I think we'll have to do that in the short term until we're more comfortable that things are running along smoothly, and then we can step back again. Now, they are having an issue with getting enough employees, but I don't know a business in Dubbo that isn't having that same issue. They're bringing in employees from other pools that they manage, so they've got that huge advantage over council. We may well have had an identical problem with not enough staff, but I don't really want to focus on that because we gave a contract to a company and we pay them money to not have us have the problem. So whether we would have the same problems or not is a little bit irrelevant because we're paying another organisation to do it. You take care of
Absolutely,
it.
and I think that's a big part of this whole frustration. I think that the Dubbo community is generally feeling right now, and I suggest Wellington as well, that this is an organisation that is getting paid to do a job that many people are feeling is not being done effectively enough. Simple things like making sure that the lawn looks immaculate, I would suggest there's always been a quality scenario down there. Having those little things sorted out, it may not sound like a lot sitting on here and there, but I can tell you for people going down there, visually and aesthetically, you want that place looking Mickey Mouse. That should be just a standard operation. Anyone could be able to operate a lawnmower. The next thing, I suppose, things like your water slides and those sort of things, why they, I can understand if you need someone up the top there and who's got the life-saving control or whatever. Okay, I get that, but you've had a couple of months now to sort this out, guys. You know, these are the things I suggest that are still causing levels of frustration. So I'm hearing here, Matt, the fact that council's onto it, and the council's obviously not happy, and are pretty keen to obviously want to see this turned around pretty quickly.
Yeah, and take the lawn mowing. If the only problem they had was the grass was a bit long, you'd say, oh yeah, the grass is a bit long, that's not too big an issue. But when you see multiple issues, then you feel like it's systemic. So when you say the water slide wasn't open, and then the canteen wasn't open, and then a pool got shut down because of equipment failure, and then a pool got shut down because of chemical failure, and then the lawn's not mowed, you think, well, gee, this is systemic.
That's an operational matter, isn't it? It really is.
And that's making sure that you've got all those things, all your ducks in a row, if you like. But also, there is an incentive for them to have more people come through. Some people have said to me, well, isn't it better for them that they just take the money and don't have anyone come through? No. The more people they get through, the more they get paid. So there's an incentive for them to run it well. So that's all a bit disappointing. And communication's probably been the biggest thing I've seen. There's been some people also talking about the Geary pool and they're not happy about the opening hours. They're opening the hours that we put in our contract. So that's not Belgravia's fault. That's council. But the opening hours we put in as a minimum are the same opening hours since the amalgamation in 2016. So when we as council, when we ran the pool, we said, here are the opening hours we're going to run with because it's expensive. We don't get a lot of people going to the Geary pool. We estimate that it costs us about $27 for each person that visits the pool in Geary. They don't get charged it, obviously.
But that's the general costing.
That's when we break down how much it costs us to run that pool, how much income we get, and then the number of people that go through, then it costs us about $27 to the community, and I'm not sure that that's acceptable when you open for longer hours and it becomes more expensive. But they're opening, so that's not Belgravia, they're opening the hours that they're meant to open there. So we'll have to do some closer contract monitoring, which is a bit frustrating, but we need to get Belgravia to come out at the end of that. We're also talking to them about some penalties. So in other words, not paying them the amount that's in the contract because of some of their poor performance in terms of some of these triggers. Not having the canteen open, that's not a trigger for penalties in terms of that. But not having the pool open, not communicating that, not following the correct procedures, they are triggers in the contract to have either cancellation of a contract or penalties in that contract. So there are things like that we're going through and working on. So we'll get there. The decision, in my opinion, is still the right decision, but we just need to get the performance running a bit better.
Now, getting back to that renewable energy zone, this is an interesting little one that sort of seems to have come up here during the week, and it's actually coming up again this week as well. There's Spices Creek Wind Farm. Now, there's been a massive expression of interest proposal sort of set forward in regards to how this sort of stuff's going to look, the Spices Creek Wind Farm. This is a huge operation. It's going to be very close to where the Badangra wind farms and wind turbines are already set up at. Is this a fait accompli? Is this moving forward to the point now whereby if anyone wishes to object to any of this or to see what's actually happening here, where are we up to in regards to Spices Creek Wind Farm?
So to give you an idea of the size of this one, 117 wind turbines.
That's a lot of wind times, isn't it? Wow. 700
megawatts of power.
Oof.
It'll power approximately 395,000 homes in this state.
That's incredible.
That's more than there are in Dubbo.
Wow. So it's just like it just beggars belief the size of these operations. This is a thing that I don't know if people have got their head around this yet.
Well, what impresses me is how much power each turbine produces. I normally say to people very roughly, and these numbers aren't quite what I'm going to quote here, but very roughly, one turbine is about 3,000 homes. So you think of one turbine sitting there, the blade just majestically turning around there, and there's 3,000 homes you've powered. Wow, that's pretty cool.
It is.
So this is probably northeast, I'd describe it, of Wellington. So a bit further away than the Badangra Wind Farm, but in the vicinity. what's happened is that the environmental impact statement has already been out. So this is one of those many processes that we've got to go through in the regulatory process. So that's already out. The submissions have been put into that time frame is closed now. And now the next stage is those submission responses will be public this week. So people will be able to read the submissions, because sometimes people will go, oh, yeah, I'm okay with that. And then they look at the submissions and go, oh, wait up, that might trigger something else there.
So can people still object to this as an option?
I think they should be able to.
Okay.
We're not the consent authority, so I don't know the exact time frames associated with that. This obviously goes through a different planning process for a project of this size and a wind farm. But as far as I know, yes, you'd still be able to, because you look at those responses, you might be able to, that might trigger something else from there. But I think it's interesting just to look at that. In the submission responses, you'll see a couple of things that might be of interest to you. One is workers' accommodation. Squadron have talked to Dubbo Regional Council about taking some land in Keswick to build a workers' accommodation.
Now, Squadron's the group that's going to be setting up this, isn't it?
Correct. Squadron is the company. This is the one owned by Andrew Forrest, Twiggy Forrest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And in general, our dealings with Squadron have been very impressive. I met with Jason Willoughby, the CEO. You may remember we talked about that some time ago. Yep. But we've found them pretty good to deal with in terms of the words that they've spoken and the commitment they've given. We haven't seen on the ground yet, but we've certainly found them very good from that perspective. And even Penny Sharp, when we were talking about Squadron Energy, she was actually impressed. They seem to be one of those organisations that really wants to make sure they do the right thing, they leave a lasting legacy. It's not just about the bottom dollar. They'll make money, I'm sure, but it's not solely focused on the bottom dollar, which is quite pleasing to hear. But again, let's see how they progress. Sometimes shareholders say,
you're looking here, you're saying you're talking to them about Keswick Estate in regards to getting some homes that's up there for them, or?
Well, what they want to do is they want to build some workers' accommodation somewhere. Now, we're encouraging organisations around the res to do as much in Wellington, because we really want to transform Wellington. We know that Dubbo will get benefits out of this regardless. But just the sheer quantity of workers that they'll need, they just haven't been able to find anywhere in Wellington that will suit them. So they've talked to council about Keswick and said, we'd like to take some land. We'd like to build some workers' accommodation, which might scare some people in Keswick, saying, oh, no, I want lovely houses next to me. I don't want homes that look like a mining camp, for example. I don't want dongers on the site there.
Which is understandable. You can see
absolutely right.
That. Yeah.
So we've talked to them and we've expressed those concerns there. What this would look like, and there's no decision being made yet, but there's just a discussion. What this would look like would be a parcel of land in Keswick where there aren't homes next door to it yet. They would lease that land off council rather than buy it. They would then put in the infrastructure. We'd give them a basic map of the sort of infrastructure that we would want for housing to go there, normal housing to go there eventually. So I'm talking about underground sewage and water and telecommunications and power, all the things we'd normally expect to see. What they'll do in the short term is they'll build better standard, better style workers' accommodation on that, and then in 5 years' time, 7 years' time, whatever time frame it might be when they're finished with that, they'll take away their workers' accommodation. What they'll leave council will be land that's already got all the underground infrastructure put in place without the cost to council. They'll have to do some roads, they'll have to do some various activities there, which will be a saving to council. Fantastic.
Would they also see this maybe as like a separate estate, like almost like an enclosed area? Is that their sort of their plan?
It probably wouldn't be an enclosed area, but it would be an area that hasn't got houses built right next to it yet. So I don't think there's going to be someone looking out across the front yard today and seeing a vacant block, and tomorrow there's a workers' camp there. It'll be a bit further away, but in 7 years' time, for example, there might be other houses built up around it because Keswick is exploding as people are building throughout there. But what we'll be left with is an area that we can then develop where someone else has paid for all of that infrastructure. So a cost saving to council, fantastic. We'll also charge them a lease fee on an annual basis. And again, so that'll be income for council. And then at the end of that time frame, we still own the land. So at no stage are we talking about selling that land. So that's all good. So again, we've got more work to do on that. We've got to go through a process that would go through a public council meeting, etc. All we've had so far have been some discussions. But when people look at these submission responses from the EIS, that will be, because one thing they've got to solve as part of their whole process is where people are going to live. So that'll be one thing. Just keep your eye out for it. People might sit and go, hold on, I didn't know anything about this. Well, it's probably not at the stage that you need to know a lot about it yet, but certainly. So
it's an idea in a conceptual idea right now that if you're up there living in Keswick Estate, like there might be a few listeners up here now, may not necessarily be so excited by that. Others will probably sit back and go, oh, that's fantastic, it's great, I think it's good use of the space and get people in and, council benefits from it. But there may be some residents that may feel, no, I don't necessarily want this near where I'm living. Is there going to be a point in time that they're going to get their opportunity to have their say on this?
Yeah, so we've still got a lot more work to do yet. It's really been that sort of first level discussion. And the reason I mentioned it is because if people read the document that comes out from Squadron this week, they might see reference to that. And again, it's no decision made by council. It would have had to go through a public council meeting. It would have had to go through from a resolution from councillors. All we've done so far is we've had a workshop, we've had a bit of a discussion, but as you know, no decisions are made at workshops. But you've got to start somewhere. You've got to start these discussions somewhere. It's not as if everyone that knocks on our door and says, council, I'm interested in this, stop. We can't go any further. We've got to go to a council meeting for that. You've got to have some discussion before you get to that level. The other part, which is very exciting, is that they might need some water, for example, to produce some green hydrogen. They might need some quantities of water. And at the moment, it's expensive to go and buy water licences, and there's not a lot of excess water hanging around that people can go and access there. So people are selling water in terms of licences for water, but you're paying a fair bit for it. They've talked about the idea of taking our treated effluent and using that, but it's not at a high enough standard when it comes out of our sewage treatment plant.
This was the problem in the past, wasn't it, with the use of this? There was an idea, a concept that they had, previous council had in regards to it, didn't they?
Correct, that's right, and they didn't research it enough, and then they thought they could put a pipe in the ground and run some water from there down to near the water treatment plant, but they hadn't researched it far enough. Well, they had researched, they hadn't read the papers where the research told them quite clearly that they needed to treat the water to a higher level before they could use those pipes. So we've got pipes in the ground now. $5 million was spent by the last council putting pipes in the ground that can't be used.
Can't be used right now.
But there might be some little tiny glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel because we've been working on ways, how can we take advantage of those pipes? We don't want to go and create a whole solution just to take advantage of the fact that some people didn't make a good decision. But this is one where we've talked to them briefly, and again, this might be in the documents that come out this week, where we've said maybe, Squadron, you could actually build a facility that would treat that water out of our sewage treatment plant to a high enough standard for you to use for your production. But then when we've got a dry year, maybe then we could have priority of that water over your production for, people end up able to drink it, for example. So that's getting
back to the drinking the poo stuff we talked about last week.
Yeah, now I'm not sure if it'll go that far. It might just be used to water some fields where we can't water them now. But bottom line is we might get a good outcome for Squadron. We might get a good outcome for the community to get something built, not at our cost. So everyone's a winner in that scenario. Don't know what the final solution for that will be, but again, you might see something along those lines in that documentation that comes out from Squadron this week. So keep an eye for that. But things are happening on a lot of different fronts. There's a lot of things happening at the same time, a lot of balls in the air at the moment. And this is still only near the very beginning of things that are happening with the res. You'll see a lot of activity around this res, and things will start to happen where people will see that. Part of the problem we've got with not enough employees to work at the pool is a lot of our employees are being taken up by these new job opportunities. So it's that problem we've got, isn't it? We want more people to come to fill all these positions. We need the housing for them to live in. It's this constant problem we've got. But it's a good problem.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly right. And mate, very quickly, looks as though the last council meeting for the year is going to come up this week. So you're back in time. You've come back from your trip away in Japan, and you've come back here just in time for the last council meeting of the year. Is that right? Is this the last one coming up?
Exactly right. So Thursday, the 14th of December, normal time, 5:30 p.m. Come along physically. This one's in Dubbo. Come along, sit in the gallery if you want. Tune in online, watch that. Last council meeting before Christmas, obviously. So
will Santa be there?
I assume that's how I'll be dressed. I assume that I'll just turn up dressed as Santa. But it's something that it's nice to get to the end of the year and kind of reflect back. I haven't actually done it yet, but I'll probably reflect a little bit back on the year. I normally do a bit of a summary of what's happening in the month at the end of the council meeting, each meeting. But I'll probably do a bit of a reflection on the year because it's been a busy year, lots of activity, lots of successes in council. I think things are going fantastically well.
Wonderful.
And so, look, tune in, I suppose. Keep an eye out. I won't go through some of the things in the meeting. We normally talk about that next week after the meeting. But keep an eye out, tune in. We always like to see people come along and certainly tune in online.
Yeah, absolutely. This Thursday. Now, 'tis the season to be jolly. It is Christmas coming up. We all love a bit of Christmas, but of course everyone's entitled to a little bit of time off at this time of the year. Which normally means the fact that with council, that also means our council workers, they're just as entitled to some time off like everybody else. So, Matt, Christmas closures. Just briefly, what are some of the main Christmas closures? Just sort of update our listeners in regards to which places are going to be closed and when.
Yeah, and I won't go through all of them.
A couple of the main ones.
Yeah, I'll go through some of the main ones. And keep in mind that there are some emergency numbers, which I'll give you in a moment as well. But I don't take a break. So if people need to contact me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
3 a.m. in the morning is always up for a call.
Exactly right. I just assume that the mayor is available anytime. And again, if I'm meeting someone or I'm recording a podcast, I'm not going to take your phone call, but I'll certainly ring you back or answer emails, etc. So I assume that councillors, and I won't talk for the other councillors, but certainly as mayor, I assume that I don't get a break, but our staff do, definitely. So if you do have an emergency, just ring the normal number, 6801 4000. After hours, that goes through to an emergency service so that if you do have something where you see...
there will be a skeleton staff, is there? Like a
well,
Christmas staff? Or?
We have staff on call so that for an emergency, so a burst water main, we're not going to say, we're back in a couple of weeks' time, we'll just leave that water running
We'll see on the 28th.
Yeah, that's right, or next year even.
Yeah, that's right.
So we've got a process in place that if you ring 6801 4000, it does go through, leave your information there, and someone will come back. I'm not saying... I've decided to pay my rates now. It's Christmas Day. I better leave a call on that emergency service. You're probably not going to get someone to ring back immediately. But if it's a blocked public toilet, if it's a burst water main, or there's some issue that involves council that's an emergency, absolutely ring that number still. And if someone rang me, for example, after hours, I would take their information and I would just ring 6801 4000. I've got no special number that I ring. I would ring that and it would go through that process. The actual building, so the council building at Dubbo and Wellington, the branches, if you like, closed from Christmas Day, so they'll be open on Christmas Eve, and closed on Christmas Day, reopened on the 8th of January.
Okay, so it's a reasonable break there.
It is a reasonable break, and we've looked at that previously. We typically have opened up at the beginning of January after New Year's Day, etc., but we just found the number of people who were doing things then, not a lot of people lodging DAs or doing building applications. Not a lot of people coming to pay their rate. So we just found it was pretty quiet then. So give the staff a little bit more time. Have a good break.
We used to always refer to January as the builder's holiday month.
Well, spot on there. And then you've got a few things. So just, for example, Old Dubbo Jail, it's open every day except Christmas Day. So if you've got friends around, take them down there. Boxing Day, sure thing. Visit Information Centre, closing, that's in Wellington and Dubbo, closing on 2 days. So Christmas Day and Boxing Day for those two.
Okay.
Again, when you go through and look at a whole range of things, I suppose the best thing to do is just look at the actual dubbo.nsw.gov.au, look at the website and see, because you've got different things. So you've got different dates for the Wellington Cave, you've got Botanical Gardens, Western Place Cultural Centre, the library, lots of different facilities we've got. Even the waste disposal facility, that's only closed on Christmas Day. Right. So if you want to clean up some rubbish around the house over Christmas, you've got the family home, for example.
Plenty of opportunities still. There's only 1 day there.
That's right. While you're home, just give us a hand, will you? And you mightn't get your kids to come home again. So even the pools, they're closed just on Christmas Day. Okay. So a whole range of different facilities there. And again, I've run through a few of them there, but I won't go through all of them.
So it sounds like Christmas Day is probably the main day that most things are closed. But outside of that, quite a lot of the facilities are open.
Yeah, but think about Rainbow Cottage, for example. They're open for a bigger break as well. So if there's some of those services that are not tourist related and not essential related like the Wild Andrew Waste Depot, then they're probably going to be closed for a bit longer over that period. But just have a look on the website. Be mindful of the fact. Don't turn up on Christmas Day and go, Old Dubbo Jail's not open.
How can they not be open on Christmas Day? What's going on?
Why didn't someone tell me about that?
Yeah.
So it's really just have a look, have a think about some of those facilities, and where possible we keep them open. But again, giving the staff a break, but it's also expensive for us to keep some of those facilities open. If we had Old Dubbo Jail open on Christmas Day, it would be very expensive for us, for example.
Well, to all the staff out there, enjoy your break.
Exactly right.
Now, Matt, looks like there's been some settlement in regards to the Southern Distributor land. Now, this is the Southern Distributor coming off Hennessy Drive there, sort of going around the back, which will eventually connect up to the Blue Ridge Link Road. So when we say settlement here, has council purchased the land now so that it's ready to rock and roll when the time comes? So
we're doing some long-term planning, and what we'll see in Dubbo, and I'm talking maybe 10 years now, as you go around Macquarie Street, around the outskirts of Dubbo, and we call this the Southern Distributor, you'll go along there, you go into Old Dubbo Road for a short part, and then you'll turn down Hennessy. And as you go Hennessy now, you get down to Wheelers Lane, you turn left on Wheelers Lane. But there's a huge number of houses that are being built there in Keswick. So the plan is that we think a better solution for people that are just trying to go from maybe parts of Dubbo in the south to maybe parts of Dubbo in the west will be to go around the outside of that Keswick estate. So essentially, we've bought some land along there for that Hennessy Drive to extend down past the development there, then turn left and eventually join up with Sheraton, and then, as you said, go into Blue Ridge Link Road through there. It might be you might live in West Dubbo, you might want to take your kids to school that might be up around Sheraton Road, and we're probably talking about, as we build a bridge that's going to be south of LH Ford Bridge, we've talked about a Tamworth Street Bridge or somewhere around there, you're in West Dubbo, you might say, well, it's better for me to go across that bridge there when it exists, loop around Macquarie Street, up Hennessy Drive and along Sheraton. A lot of that area will be 60 k's an hour, maybe 70 k's an hour for some parts of that, rather than going through residential streets at 50 k's an hour, for example. So overall, we needed to plan for that. Now, that was all great to plan for that. There's a road there at Hennessy, but it's not going to be big enough, and we need some more land as we turn around and go left or go north along there. So there's some land owned by Mars, so we've had some negotiations and discussions. So we've now bought that land. That's now settled.
Okay.
We're not going to use that tomorrow.
Yeah. So this is like the 10-year plan. This is
it's
the
strategic
vision plan.
planning. That's right. And you'd probably argue that we should have bought that land a few years ago, but I don't think people were looking strategically a few years ago.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, it is. That's right. This council's certainly looking more strategically. So we'll buy that land, or we've bought that land, but we won't do anything with it. It's a big picture plan. And also, who pays for that land or that road? Who's going to be doing that? Is it something we put in grants for over the years? Quite probably. But we've got the land. That's the important part, because the last thing you want to do is say, oh, one day that'll be good, do nothing about it, and houses keep getting built there, other roads are built, and then suddenly we come along one day and say, oh, we'd like that land. Well, that land would be more expensive then, and you might start having to buy houses of people. It gets very expensive to do that. Yeah. So getting it when it's just a dirt paddock and a bit of a laneway at the moment is much smarter than waiting until down the track.
Is this going to, so this, of course, that's part of the 10-year plan, but we talked there about Blue Ridge Link. What's happening there with that? Just in regards to, is that about to start, that Blue Ridge Link?
So we've got the two, if you remember. We've got one where we're trying to get traffic off Sheraton Road. So we've got one part of that will build through, and then the traffic will go through Blue Ridge. Yep. Let's call that Blue Ridge Link Road Phase 1 or Stage 1.
Oh, that's very creative of you.
And then the bigger picture plan from that is to then basically take that traffic not through the Blue Ridge Industrial Estate there, it'll actually turn up and go straight off to the Newell Highway. So there'll be a Stage 2 of that one there. The Stage 1, we want to get Stage 1 done, get that link road done to the point where we'll take the heavy traffic off Sheraton Road, and then traffic can go along on that part.
What's the time frame with that? We've got a time frame for that? Or?
Yeah, we have. I think we talked about it before to say that we'll probably get towards the end of next year before we'll have that part done. So it's not a quick thing to do.
No.
And then sometime in that following year, so I'm now talking about 2026, we'll get that Sheraton Road done to a level that should be done at. Yeah. And I had actually someone inquire about that during the week. They said, oh, we've got these big trucks on Sheraton Road and on Mayoral Street. Are they allowed to be there? Well, in general, unless it's a B-double or a road train, and there are specific B-double and road train routes, road train routes is nowhere on the maps that I'm aware of that road trains are allowed on Mayoral or Sheraton. But certainly B-doubles, there are certain parts of Mayoral Street, for example, where B-doubles are allowed, sometimes allowed all the time, other times with certain traffic conditions associated with that. But if you're just seeing trucks typically, and this isn't hard and fast, but give people an idea, if the trucks are below 42.5 tonnes and they're not oversized, typically they're allowed on just about every road.
Yeah, right. Okay, didn't know that.
Now, I would call Sheraton and Mayoral not necessarily residential roads. I'd call them more a distributor road, a trunk road. Yep. They're in residential areas, but not a little street that winds through some little tiny residential areas. Yep. But generally, you're going to see trucks.
Well, they are thoroughfare roads, aren't they? Like
they are.
You've got the double distribution on either side and the two lanes and all that sort of stuff happening. So I can understand why that would be, how people would interpret it that way. Yeah,
that's right. And people say it's getting busier and there's more trucks, and I would say yes.
Dubbo's getting bigger.
Yeah. Exactly right. Dubbo's growing, Dubbo's booming, actually. So you're going to see more of that, unfortunately. And they do more damage to the roads. And it's not great. I mean, I ride a push bike, and it's not great when you see trucks coming along those roads. And individual drivers sometimes aren't perfect. But in general, those trucks are legally allowed to go on there. It's our responsibility to make sure we build roads accordingly. So that's an ongoing challenge for us.
Sounds good. Now, Mayoral Memo. Congratulations. You're up to number 100. So, did you get a letter from the King?
Another century, you think?
Yes, there it is, eh? Bradman, you. 100 Mayoral Memos. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I actually thought about it, and I haven't missed one. So when I first was elected mayor for Dubbo Regional Council,
Yep.
I used to write a mayoral column in the Daily Liberal when I was mayor of Dubbo City Council. So I said to the Liberal again, would you like me to write a mayoral column? They said, yes, we'd like you to do that again. Can you start next year? So it was a December election. So I started from them. Once I wrote number one, then I haven't skipped one. And again, that's the thing I talk about over Christmas, over
It's
New
very
Year.
disciplined of you, to be honest, to write 100, not miss one. That's
Well, what's more disciplined is the number of words. Everyone has had an identical word count.
You're kidding.
The word count that they asked for. I'm a bit pedantic about it because they asked for a word count,
Right.
and every single one has got the identical word
So tell me the
count.
total word count. What's your word count?
470 for those.
470.
470 words.
For each one's
For each
470.
words, yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
So total, if I actually
I was
go
going to
back...
say 4.7 words
No,
per Mayoral Memo.
that's right.
Some of them may say that's all you need, but I don't know.
Maybe. So if I look at all of them, if I actually go back, I wrote 242 columns for my role as Dubbo City Council Mayor,
Right.
and now 100 as you mentioned there.
Yeah.
So I estimate about 165,000 words in those.
Oh, there you go.
That's probably 2 novels worth.
Yeah, that's probably about right, yeah.
And so I started thinking about it actually. I thought, well, what can I do in my 100th column? What can I reflect on? What can I talk about? And one of the things I thought about reflecting on was the 2-year anniversary. So on the 4th of December.
Of the council.
Yeah,
Yeah,
2021, 4th of December was the election.
Yes.
So do I count it from that point, or do I count it when the council election was declared? Let's go from the election day, because kind of from that point in time, most councillors knew they were elected. They weren't officially in the role. But so it's 2 years. So congratulations to all this group of council.
Yeah, that's right.
And for 9 of us, that's the first 2 years ever on Dubbo Regional Council.
Oh,
One
well, see,
councillor,
that's an achievement. It
that
really
is,
is.
yeah. One councillor was re-elected, but 9 of us first time ever on that. And so I started thinking about what I could reflect on, and just thought about the variety of topics that we've had over those times. But I thought more about, rather than looking back in the past, looking more in the future. And I think one of the things that was interesting was having an international trip, which we're going to talk about in a moment,
Yep.
and having that international trip when it was the time when I was writing that 100th anniversary, or 100th mayoral column, if you like. And so I just thought it's actually quite interesting, this whole concept of international relations and how you can utilise those. And let's be really philosophical for a moment. I know my Rotary Club, I was a youth officer years ago, and so I dealt with exchanges, and it really brought the world closer together, having some of those international relations and understanding more about the differences and the similarities amongst people across the world. We're all people,
Yes,
ultimately.
absolutely we are.
And I thought about one story that I learnt from a previous visit to Japan when I went through the museum at Hiroshima. And it talked about, there was a letter in there talking about where they were going to bomb. I mean, this is a pretty serious decision about where you're going to bomb. And it was interesting because there was a committee set up to look at where to bomb, but there were 2 people who could override
Imagine
that
being
committee.
on that committee, they'd have to make that decision.
Exactly right. And then it came back, and one of those people that made the ultimate decision was the US Secretary of War, Henry L. Stimson.
Right.
And one of the places that was recommended was Kyoto.
Yeah, right.
That's right. Now, he said, Henry Stimson said, don't bomb Kyoto. I had my honeymoon there many years before the war, and it was a beautiful place.
Oh, no.
So let's go somewhere else.
Is that right?
So just the fact that he'd visited there
Yeah.
saved Kyoto from being bombed.
Yeah.
Again, that's getting that's a bit lucky, that one, and it's getting a bit philosophical. But I just think what we can learn going forward and how we can make the community better.
Yep.
Let's not keep looking over our shoulders. Let's look forward, and let's go, well, there's 100 columns written, fantastic. So I'm not going to reflect on those. Let's look forward and see what we can do going forward. So that might be a bit of a segue into the next topic I might talk
I like
about.
it. Let's do it. Now, as you said, speaking of Japan, and a little nice little segue you managed to create for me there. You've just come back from Japan. You've spent the last week over there. Last time I saw you, you're getting ready to get on the literally now I saw you and just literally got off the plane, thank God, with the little bouncy landing there. But let's talk about this. Just to remind our listeners in regards to what this was all about. Talk to us, first of all, about why you went and who this group CLAIR was. Now, CLAIR's the group who organised the trip. Just sort of give a little brief rundown, because I know there's been a little bit of... let's say social media bashing, which seems to sort of come in sort of line with being the mayor around here. And there's been some comments there made about, it's a junket, it's council's paid for it, and and how dare you use ratepayers' money to go off there over to Japan for a week. So I know the story, but let's talk it through in regards to listeners so we get all this clarified. First of all, Matt, who's paid for the trip? Why'd you go, and who's CLAIR?
So lots of questions there. So I'll actually go back even further than that. The policy of council since I was elected in 2004, and I don't know how many years before that, was that council did not pay for councillors to go overseas, not a part payment, a little bit of payment. If councils are going overseas, even though you might be representing Dubbo, then you paid for that yourself. And I was quite comfortable with that. And some people have said that's a bit unfair because not every councillor could afford to go on a trip. But again, it's pretty hard to justify fully the expense of those trips. And I know other councils do. And one perfect example, I'm not picking on anyone here in particular, but I know that Tamworth, the mayor and the general manager have been to Nashville on several occasions and councillors paid for that, for those individuals. And the reason they do that is because they look at what they do in Nashville and then they want to compare that to the Tamworth Country Music Festival and what can they learn from that. I don't have a problem with that, but again, they get a bit of a hammering from the community when they do that and spend ratepayers' money on that. But I've been overseas 4 separate occasions representing Dubbo. And I've paid for all of those myself. On some of those occasions, I've taken my wife and my children. Again, I've paid for those, or our family has paid for all of those ourselves. And other occasions, I've been over by myself. So I've been over in May 2012. I went to Wujiang and on
China?
Wujiang in China, which is our sister city there. And I watched Richard Mutton, who was a councillor at the time, be made an honorary citizen of Wujiang.
Oh, right.
And I had my wife and our 4 children.
I didn't realise Richard was an honorary citizen.
Honorary citizen of Wujiang, that's exactly right. For the good work that he'd done with some of the exchange programs, they made him an honorary citizen. So that trip, I paid for the trip over there myself, and again, our family went along on that one. Then in June 2013, I spoke at a symposium at Minakamo, which is our Japanese sister city. So I went over in June 2013. I paid for that myself and went over and spoke at the symposium there. Then in November 2014, I went over and celebrated our relationship of 25 years with Minakamo, again, sister city there. So, and sorry, on one of those trips, I took my wife and our 4 children, and they were very honoured that I brought along my wife and our children as part of that trip. Again, all of those trips are paid for, all of the flights, etc., are paid for by our family. And then this one here, those previous 3, were as Mayor of Dubbo City Council. This trip here I've been on, then again, I've paid for the flights over there. So that kind of answers the trip a little bit about the cost, but I'll go further. CLAIR is an organisation which is a Japanese-based organisation. It stands for Council of Local Authorities for International Relations.
Right.
They've got a number of offices around the world. 7 would be my guess, but you can look it up on their website.
So they're an international group.
They're a Japanese organisation that has offices in international locations. They've got an office in Sydney. I've dealt with them before for anything that involves international relations with Japan. I've dealt with them before, for example, with our sister cities. Good organisation, well-run organisation. And again, those offices around the world, they've got set up there. They like to do, they call it a seminar. A seminar to me normally says 1 day, but a seminar for them is say 4 days.
Yeah, right.
They like to do a seminar once every couple of years where they have people go across from Australia over to Japan on an official delegation. So they send out an expression of interest. I'm assuming that if you're a councillor, maybe a high-level executive at a council, but obviously it's all to do with council. So you want people involved in council to go on that. They sent out an expression of interest, said, we would like to have people tell us if you're interested in going across on this next trip that we're doing at the beginning of December.
So potentially all aldermen, councillors across Australia could well have received this email. Potentially.
Yeah, I'm not sure how far it went, who it went to. Again, to me. Again,
you certainly got a copy.
I've dealt with them before, so they might have selected who it went to. They might have gone out to different ones. I don't know who it went to, but I received a copy, and I said, well, that time frame, that works well. I'm not at a council meeting at that particular time, so I could do that. My wife had tickets to Harry Connick Jr. that she'd bought, so I was a bit uncertain whether I could get away with it with my wife, not going to that concert. But in general, the dates were okay. Good. And so I said, look, I'd be interested, tell me more information. They came back and said, give us some more information about yourself. You know, they had some questions to fill in as any sort of process there. I filled in those further questions, sent that off to them. And then I don't know how many applications they get, but there are 5 positions. That's it. They've only got 5 spots for the delegation. They came back then and said to me, thank you, we received information, we know who you are, we looked at that information further, and yes, you've been selected to go along on that delegation, one of the 5. And furthermore, with your background, experience, et cetera, we would like you to be the official leader of this delegation.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Now, as leader, and there was no box to say, yes, I want to be the leader. I didn't even know they had a leader of the delegation per se.
So they read through your profile and all the stuff you put in there, and they made this decision themselves. CLAIR did.
Correct. That's exactly right. And basically they said, as leader of the delegation, you would be required to be the one that makes some speeches and to receive some gifts from the various people that might be giving you gifts, because Japanese people are very big on giving gifts, and they might be received on behalf of the delegation, etc. So are you willing to undertake that role as leader of the delegation? So
Nice.
I said, yes, I was happy to do that. And so the process was that you bought your own plane tickets. I did that.
Yeah.
And then once you landed at Tokyo, CLAIR organised the rest of it from there. So I had someone at the airport who had gone to the trouble of buying a ticket for a bus for me, so I could get on a bus and go from the airport into Tokyo, and then stayed at a motel, which again CLAIR paid for. So CLAIR basically paid for the meals, the accommodation, and the internal transfers, whether it be bus or plane. And so basically you could do that. Anything extra from there, any other expenses from your own perspective, you paid for yourself, but very well organised and a good group of people. So we had the Mayor of Bunbury was along.
Right.
We had a councillor from New Zealand.
Yep.
And then we had 2 senior staff. One senior staff member was a gentleman who manages 11 councils in a collective type organisation in South Australia.
Yep.
And another one who was undertaking the role of a CEO in a New Zealand council. So it was Australian-New Zealand delegation.
Okay.
So a good group. So 2 senior executives and 3 councillors. 2 of those councillors happen to be mayors. And so they liked that idea. They didn't want 5 mayors, for example, because 5 mayors have all got a similar viewpoint. They didn't want 5 CEOs or general managers of council because they've got a slightly different viewpoint. So it was a good mix. And talking to CLAIR themselves, they said this is a really good mix of people there.
Because it's actually asked sort of the question in regards to, like, I can hear, and we'll certainly talk about this in regards to what you personally gained from this experience. But I suppose the other part is this, since CLAIR's, well, that they funded most of the trip there for you once you're over there, what did they get from this?
Well, CLAIR is actually funded by local governments in Japan.
Right,
so
okay.
CLAIR is an organisation that says we're going
Like
to...
an advisory group almost sort of thing, are they?
Well, they try and improve international relations.
Okay.
Then they go and talk to the councils that are in Japan and they say, we need funding from you. So that funding is used to help fund trips like this sort of thing.
Yep.
And they also second staff from local government areas. They've got a maximum of 3 years and they might use those staff in Japan or they might send those staff to an international office. So, for example, on one of the nights we had a dinner with the managing director of CLAIR and 2 staff that have just started working for CLAIR. They'll work for them in Tokyo for a year and then they'll come to the Sydney office for 2 years and then after that they'll go back to their council, their donor council. So the councils across Japan are happy to contribute to CLAIR because they believe that will build better international relationships. So the funding comes from there. Maybe they get a bit of money from the federal government. I don't know the exact funding model, but it's not as if they put you up in tents each night. They put you up in reasonable places, but they expect their pound of flesh as well. So each day started fairly early, and for me personally, it's very full on because I'm still the mayor of Dubbo Regional Council when I'm overseas. It used to be, or in fact, the local government act says something along these lines that the mayor is the mayor unless he can't undertake the role, and then you can nominate the deputy mayor or another council to take over those roles. And way back in about 2005, I think it was, I was deputy mayor, and Alan Smith went overseas on a trip that he paid for. He was the mayor at the time. He paid for that trip personally. And so he officially appointed me to be the mayor for the 2 weeks while he was overseas. And he said it's kind of a bit confusing because he's overseas representing Dubbo and he's nominated or seen as the mayor of Dubbo while he's doing things overseas, obviously, because you're dealing with a mayor. But then back in Dubbo, I was officially the mayor of Dubbo while I was undertaking the role and replying to correspondence and making decisions the same as Alan would have when he was here, for example. Now communications have improved quite dramatically. So what I would do typically is I'd get up early in the morning, and I'm talking about 4:30 maybe 5 o'clock each morning.
Is that right?
In,
Yes.
in Japanese time, they're about 2 hours behind.
Yep.
I'd still undertake interviews that I had lined up, that my normal standing interviews that I do.
Okay.
I would write my Mayoral memo, my 100th Mayoral memo, for example. I
yep.
wrote very early one morning. I'd still make some phone calls that I needed to make, catch up on any phone calls, answer emails, that type of thing. And so by the time it got to about 8 o'clock in the morning, I've done a lot of that. I'd go and have breakfast with our group, usually 8:30, sometimes a bit early, but usually about 8:30. We're on the bus for the next part of the trip. So I'd already been up and
Sounds
done.
like half your day's already done from the
Well,
sound of things.
I've
That's
probably
it.
done
Yeah,
4
yeah.
hours of work there.
That's right.
And then at a lunchtime where we might stop to have lunch, for example, I might just duck out and answer a few more
When do you have your sleep in
emails.
the afternoon? Did you have a little couple?
No chance of that.
Maybe that's me. If it was me, that's what I'd be doing. I tell you now.
And then you're still at official functions that night at 8 or 9 o'clock.
Yeah,
So
geez.
it's a fairly long day, fairly busy day. And again, someone who said, oh, what a great junket. Well, if it was a junket, I'd be there with my wife, with my feet up, taking it easy.
That's right.
It's pretty full on. And you've got to
Yeah.
be attentive the whole day, and you're using a translator to communicate. Sometimes I'd use an app that I had on my phone. So you've really got to concentrate the whole day and be on your game as such to make sure you're doing
Well, those
it all.
multivitamin tablets you're taking must be working very well for you.
Indeed, indeed.
Now, I want to ask you a bit of a broad question here in regards to what you actually gain from the trip. Similarities and differences. I'd be suggesting the fact that going across over there, it's a bit of that same but different type scenario. Can I get started off in regards to some of these similarities and differences, just in regards to housing? This is an issue that we face here. And is it the same issue over in Japan?
Well, it's the opposite issue. And so what I might do, if it's okay with you, is I might just talk about a broader picture of local government in Japan, because the first morning started off with a professor from a university in Tokyo and we sat down like we're in a classroom, and he gave us a lecture about Japanese local government. And it was quite interesting. It was very well done, and certainly had a PowerPoint presentation. I had some handouts there, and we learned about local government in Japan. So I'll talk a bit about that if that's okay. And that will answer your question that you're talking
cool.
about.
As long as you get into that, that'd be great. Awesome.
Yeah. So the first thing was we talked about the number, and there are 1,718 municipalities.
Right.
That's the equivalent of our local government areas. So we've got 537 here in Australia. The New Zealand delegates weren't sure exactly how many they had in New Zealand. But
We'd be 40 times the size
we're
of the country-wise.
What are we, 25 million? They're 128 million. So they're five.
They're number-wise. Our size-wise, the physical size.
Physical,
of
that's right.
Australia
So they'd be
is
5
so
times
much
the
bigger.
population.
Yeah.
And in terms of that, so we're 7.7 million square kilometres, and they're less than that, significantly less than that.
Absolutely, that's right.
So they've got 1,718 local government areas, municipalities, but they've just gone through some mergers across the whole area.
Oh,
they had about 3,000 until fairly recently, so they've amalgamated down. And they
Same
weren't-
reasons why it happened here in Australia? Same type of idea?
Well, to a certain extent, because financial sustainability was the number one issue, without a doubt. We talked to the New Zealand group there, or the New Zealand, 2 people from New Zealand, the 3 from Australia, and the Japanese. What's the number one issue there? Financial sustainability. That's the number one issue there. So without a doubt, that was similar.
Big similarity there, yeah.
Absolutely right. And it was number one with a bullet across all of our areas. Now, what's interesting, though, is those amalgamations they've had weren't forced amalgamations. They were offered some incentives by the national government, sometimes the prefecture government. The prefecture is like the state government.
Okay.
They were offered some incentives to amalgamate. So if
A bit like Australia as well.
well,
We had a financial incentive to amalgamate with Wellington.
we didn't actually get the chance to say no, whereas in these cases they could
Fair
say
call.
no.
Yes.
And there may be some further amalgamations, but they're pretty comfortable with ours 1,718 at this stage. One of the reasons that financial sustainability is a huge issue for them is that there are different areas that are a responsibility of local government in Japan, but similar to Australia. But one of the things that's absolutely different is that we've got a problem, we've talked about it already today, with a growing population and enough housing.
Yeah.
Now, I've talked about it, I've joked about it, and it's not really meant to be funny, but just as an offhand comment, I've said it's a better problem to have too many people coming to your area and not enough housing than the opposite problem, which is people leaving and then you've got too many houses. And some people said to me, no, it'd be great to have too many houses, the prices of housing would go down. Well, that's right, but you don't really want to be in an area where the population is declining.
No.
Japan is that area.
Is
the
that
whole
right?
of Japan. We saw some graphs there that said 128 million now. The estimation by the year 2050 might be 105 million.
Wow.
Now, this is forward estimation, so that's not obviously
That's
locked
scary.
on solid,
Yeah.
but that's a fair decline. So what you've got in local government areas is one of their issues with financial sustainability is the same issues we've got, but also each local government area is declining. If the nation's declining, each local government area can be declining. So then you're getting less money coming in from your residents.
Of course.
So you're trying to run your local government area with less money coming in from those. So they've actually got the opposite problem in terms of housing, where they've got housing that's being left derelict, housing where it's vacant. They've got plots of land, sometimes agricultural land, where people have walked away. The rates that are owed on some of these houses or plots of land are building up because that person said, well, I just can't afford to pay anymore, or no one wants to take over that particular land, or maybe the person that lived there has now died and the people that were left in the will don't want it because what am I going to do with an extra house? I don't need an extra house. So the council is sometimes taking back ownership of these for the unpaid rent or unpaid rates. Or sorry, not rent, unpaid rates.
So I'm also assuming here they're probably an ageing population. They've got a shrinking workforce population as well.
Yep.
This is all combining into the bigger problem. So
all these issues.
Wow.
So ageing population and a lower birth rate. So the birth rate is declining and the population is ageing, which is fantastic. Japanese people are known for living to be older because they've got good, healthy eating and living styles and they've got a good health system there. So that's all fantastic. But that ageing population aren't contributing to the workforce. And so you've got to somehow look after them and somehow pay for people to be looked after. So similar problems along those lines there.
Yep.
But one of the things that was really interesting, so we've got some of those issues, some of those issues that are different. When we look at what is looked after by each level of government, so they had a table on screen that had national, prefecture and municipality, so the three levels the same as we've got. And the things that we all look after are very similar in terms of policing, for example, as a prefecture level. You might have airports done at the national level. So you've got these similar concepts. But one thing that was a bit different was education.
Oh, okay.
Education is the responsibility of each municipality from kindergarten through to year 9.
Right.
And when I say the responsibility, the prefecture government, the state government, still pays the wages of the teachers, but the running of the school is done by the municipality. So one of the staff members we met was the person who was the education director.
Right.
So his responsibility was to look after education. So again, not paying the teachers, but looking after how the school is run.
They're doing the hiring, the firing, the setting the syllabus and the curriculum based, I'm sure, from probably implementation, making sure it's being implemented correctly.
Yeah,
those sort of things.
The curriculum is a higher level, but implementation, you're right. And just making sure they've got a well-run school and the assets are being kept up to date. And then from year 10, 11 and 12, the prefecture, the state government, takes over education at those levels.
Oh, okay.
And the universities are typically done at the national level. Yeah. So that's something that's certainly different, and they found that quite interesting that we don't do education. And so, again, that was different. The other one that I found fascinating, they talked about in the lecture, and I drilled down this with the professor that was giving us the lecture, the ability for the assembly, sorry, I should go back a step, they don't have councillors, they have assembly members.
Right.
Same concept, though. They have an assembly, which is effectively our council.
They still have, what, about 9 elected?
It varied from 8 to 86.
What?
So in a large council area, Yokohama City, for example, is a large council area. They have 86 assembly members there.
Wow.
But mostly the same as us, mostly 8 to maybe 15. So in Australia,
we're
having
having 86 councillors in a council meeting.
Well, it's a bit like a parliament. They kind of see that as a bit like a parliament.
Yeah, okay.
So it's like having 86 parliament members. But yeah, mainly they're similar sort of size to us. But all of their mayors are popular elected. As we know in Australia, some are popular elected. And the assembly members are elected by the community. But they have this really interesting concept where the assembly members can move a vote of no confidence in the mayor. Because the mayor is not one of them as such. The mayor is elected by the public directly.
So they can do that at a meeting, can they?
They can have a council meeting, call it a council meeting. They call it a meeting of parliament, but call it a council meeting. And they can actually move a motion of no confidence. And if that's approved or that is resolved, then I'll talk about the next steps in a moment. But I remember when I first got on council, when I was a very young councillor, I reckon I'd been in the job for 2 months. One of our councillors brought forward a motion of no confidence in the mayor. I think it was more politically driven than any sort of logic associated with it. And I went, oh, wow, I'm just on council. Motion of no confidence in the mayor. What's all this mean?
Good. Yeah, that's right.
And I talked to the council moving it, and the council told me that it meant nothing. It was just to stick it to the mayor. I went, oh, what's the point? I thought they were going to resign or something terrible was going to happen.
That's right.
Go out and give him 40 lashes or something.
Yeah.
But no, it was just, I thought, well, that's a waste of time. Why bother? But in Japan, a bit different.
Yeah, right.
If, let's say you were the assembly, let's say that you're 10 people and you're not happy with me as the mayor and I'm directly elected by the people. You can get together and have the discussion and you can move a motion of no confidence. And if that's resolved, then as the mayor, I've got two choices.
Right.
And I've got 10 days to make up my mind.
Right.
I can either resign. I can say the assembly members have said no confidence in me.
The
Fair
crowd
enough.
has spoken, yes.
That's right. I resign. And then you hold a new mayoral election so I can go and stand at that again if I want. Or I can just say, yep, I hear what they're saying.
Yep.
I've done a terrible job.
Because, of course, the people elect the mayor in Japan.
Correctly, that's right.
Okay,
Elect them directly.
Yep.
I'll resign and then I'll move on with my life. Or I'll resign and I'll go and stand again. Or I can say, I've heard what you've had to say, and instead of resigning, I'm going to sack all of you.
Really?
So it's a high-risk manoeuvre by the assembly
What do they refer to
members.
it? A Mexican standoff.
Exactly.
Who's going to blink first?
So,
Is that right?
So the assembly members can move that. Now, they're taking a bit of
Wow.
risk. They might say, this mayor's terrible, let's get rid of him.
Yep.
But or him or her, but they know that it might bounce straight back to them.
Absolutely.
And they might find themselves completely sacked.
Wow.
Now, if
it's a
that
risk you
happens,
take on both sides, isn't it?
it is. If that happens, then there's a new election held
Right.
within 30 days
Yeah.
for a new assembly.
Yeah.
Now, those assembly members can stand again.
Man.
Then, 3 months after that,
Right.
the assembly members can move a vote of no confidence again in the mayor.
Oh, right.
But this time the mayor has no choice but to resign.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So it's almost like I'm going to back myself to the fact that the mayor's going to probably sack me, but I'm going to back myself to get back on. I think the people will vote me back in.
Yep.
So I'm still going to put this forward, this motion of the no confidence in the mayor, on the basis of the fact, pretty much thinking I could get back in after this, get back in 3 months later, throw it again, and this time around you've got to step down.
Yep.
Wow.
But then I can still stand again
Jeez.
as mayor.
Well, he could
at
too, that's
election.
right, yeah.
That's
So
right.
is this sort of a regular thing? Do they do this often over there?
No.
Or?
So I was fascinated by the concept.
Yeah.
And I said, so how often does it happen? And the professor put up a table with how many times it's happened in each direction, the no confidence and the sacking of the assembly over the last, say, 10 years. And there were 2, 3, 4. 1 year it was 17.
Oh, okay,
but most
right.
years it's 2 or 3 times. And out of 1,718, that's probably not too many in general. But it's interesting because that seemed to be the way they solved the problem of the popular elected mayor being at loggerheads with the assembly members. And that's where, and again, I didn't tell them that our system's better, but that's where I probably prefer the mayor being elected from the councillors in our system because that removes a lot of that loggerhead. And again, if you're not happy with the mayor, the next time the mayor election comes up, you just say, well, sorry, you're going no good, we'll put someone else in to replace you. So that was quite fascinating. But in many other areas, it's similar. Waste disposal, garbage disposal, all handled by the council. The councils, different municipalities end up doing different things depending on what's required for that particular area.
Yep.
So, yeah, a lot of similarities there and a lot of ways to do things. The one thing I suppose I found that was similar but certainly different was they don't have curbside recycling. They have different bags. You buy a bag from the supermarket for different types of recycling or different types of waste, sorry. It might be cans, it might be general waste that gets burnt, it might be paper waste that could be recycled. And you buy those bags, you pay for those bags about 30 yen, so not much money.
Yep.
And then when you put that rubbish in, there are collection points around the city. You've got to take your rubbish to there, so no curbside collection. Yeah. And you have to put your name on that rubbish.
Oh, really?
Now, I could put your name on my rubbish.
Well, it's like a name and shame.
It is exactly right, because if you don't have your rubbish sorted correctly, you would get a knock on the door, a phone call from the council to say, Mark, we looked through your aluminium recycling. We noticed a few steel cans in there. What's the go? And you would be incredibly embarrassed by that. The Bunbury mayor talked about the fact that they've been working hard on their compliance for the contamination of their recycling, and they've introduced a system where they can start to fine people. But the Japanese local government authority said, we don't need to do that. There would be so much embarrassment if you had rubbish that wasn't correct, then you would make sure you fix that problem
I'm
up.
so impressed by their level of compliance.
Well, they are. That was one thing we found, definitely their level of compliance. So when we looked at their waste facilities, they had very clean streams of waste for all the different waste streams because people are very compliant. But I did think about the fact that you've got people, maybe elderly, maybe people without a car, you've got to get your rubbish from your household into a cage, which again is different for different days of the week. So on Mondays I can take aluminium, and Tuesday I can take.
So they're going back and forth to this place every day.
Probably most people on their way to work, they might do it.
Wow.
But for a lot of people, how do I get there? A neighbour has to do it, that type of thing. So
I can't even remember which day I have to put out the yellow bin.
That's right.
Like, I don't know. I'll go with sort of trying to remember 5 or 6 during the week. Is it aluminium ban today or is it plastic today?
I did say to the mayor, is the mayoral election coming up in February next year? And I said, well, if you want to win that election, just promise your residents that you'll do curbside recycling and then get a bit of the concept of the Homer Simpson episode where can't someone else do it? Let someone else take care of the rubbish for you. You'll have curbside recycling, but it's expensive.
Yeah.
We've got curbside recycling. I said our community would be horrified if we said you're going to take your rubbish to a drop-off point, you've got no more curbside recycling, but it would save them money without a doubt. But I think our community would be horrified. I don't think I'd go out to an election campaign doing that.
I don't think we get the same level of compliance somehow.
No, that's right.
Just very quickly, buddy, you've obviously had across there for a week. Give me some of the highlights, some of the places you've visited.
Yeah, very quickly. I'll just talk about some of the areas that I went to and just some of the things that we saw there. Certainly there was the Saga Cebu Clean Centre, which is basically where all the rubbish goes. The public can drop off rubbish there, but you get checked to make sure you're from one of the 9 local government areas around there that can take rubbish there. If you're outside that, you can't take your rubbish there.
Right.
But they said no one ever does because people are compliant in Japan.
And
you pay.
This is the rule. We follow the rule.
Right. You pay to drop your rubbish off there. But that was where we noticed lots of different areas where there was different recycling in different areas. And then what's left, they burn what's left rather than putting it in landfill.
Okay.
Because
they wouldn't have the land.
They haven't got the land, that's right. So they burn what's left and they try and generate some power from that. And they do generate a little bit of power, but nowhere near enough to cover the expenses of running that. So that was interesting, and that's where we looked at some of those disposal areas, those disposal stations, the little cages we saw. And then we saw, for example, a company that's been doing the job for 40 years now in second generation of doing the collection of all those different areas. So that's outsourced. They outsource the collection from those different cages. And that company also goes around and collects some of the rubbish from some of the businesses around there. And we looked at a recycling plan. Again, a lot of paper recycling. People bring in their recycling. Different areas, there were a number of cages set up that people drop off their recycling. And again, they said they have very low contamination. And I remember looking through it there and some of the other delegates were saying, wow, you just wouldn't see such low levels of contamination in Australia. So very good from that perspective. We saw a range of things there from an agricultural perspective, and that was interesting as well. So we saw one example where there was a parcel of land that council had taken back over because, again, their rates hadn't been paid.
Right.
And there was a gentleman that approached them and said, look, I can't afford to buy that land. I can't afford to pay the back rates, but I reckon I could run a strawberry farm. I can build a greenhouse and I can do a strawberry farm where people come and pay to pick their own strawberries.
Oh, right, okay.
So it was a good concept. And so council now is leasing that land to this gentleman over a 20-year lease.
Very creative, isn't it?
It is, because, again, they're trying to work out what to do with these vacant plots of land. So you've got some businesses like that. There was another greenhouse. It was a tomato greenhouse. They owned that land, but running very small. And one of the members of the delegation said to me, it feels like the opposite of globalisation. I don't know if localisation is a word, but it felt like the strawberries... Localisation?
We can run with it.
Yeah, let's do it. That's it. I'm happy
Probably
with
have the new word there.
So there was a greenhouse with strawberries, a greenhouse with tomatoes, a greenhouse with chrysanthemums that were mainly used in the funeral industry.
Yes.
All of these were basically delivering their product to the local market. It might have gone outside Kahuku Town, was the place we're in, but it certainly didn't go to Tokyo. It certainly stayed fairly local.
It's like an overgrown farmers' markets.
Yeah, to a certain extent. Now, Kahuku Town's small. It's a population under 10,000, 24.88 square kilometres, and a fair bit of that lies on a lowland area that's 5 metres, no more than 5 metres above sea level. So climate change is a big issue for them.
Big time.
But even we looked at some open plots that were used for things like rice and wheat farming, irrigated. It's all irrigated, of course. And there'd be a plot that wasn't that big, maybe 2 football fields, and that would be owned by one person. And they had their tractor, and they maybe had 1.5 metre sort of tillage area on the back of it there. Yes. And so that was their plot. They owned their tractor. They farmed their plot, and the next to them, there might have been 20 of these football fields there, and the farm next to them was run by someone else who owned their own tractor and did their own work on there. Right? So very small farming, and again, most of that produce was produced for the local market.
And they grew wheat and those sort of things.
They grew wheat in some of them. They grew rice in some of them. So they grew a whole range of things there. So that I certainly found quite fascinating. Yeah. There was a cattle barn which looked a bit tough. It looked like chicken battery hens you would see all cooped up like that. Cattle dealt with in the same way because they don't have enough land for those cattle to get around those areas. We also saw some of the engineering there where they've got a levee bank around there because you do have 2 rivers that meet in one area just outside the levee bank, and that's influenced by tidal areas as well. So there's the Ariake Sea, I think it's pronounced, that comes in there. So they get some tidal water that comes in and out. So 6 metre difference in that from top to bottom. So that's very big. But they also get more rain. So they're talking about some of these weather events. They said this rain event that they expected to have that every 30 years. They've had that 3 times in the last 5. So they're getting more of these rain events. But they've got these pumping stations around inside the levee bank. So if you get too much rain and too much water that gathers inside the levee bank, they have these pumping stations that are activated to turn it to pump the water from inside to outside.
Yep.
And I thought it would have been automated. We're in Japan after all.
Yep.
But they said what they do is they send out a message to the farmers, and one of the farmers will go down and manually start these pumping stations because it's in their best interest.
Yeah,
so again, they're looking after
But
each
again, I'm
other.
just trying to see how this would go in Australia. Terry, mate, look, I know it's 2 o'clock in the morning, but we've got to get that pump on. I know it's at the bottom of your paddock. Can you go and turn it on for me? Pretty sure I know what Terry's reaction is going to be here in Australia.
Yeah, exactly right.
Wow.
So I think they learned a bit on that. We had a thing at the end of it called an opinion exchange. So it was really a chance for us to put forward some of the things that we saw and noticed and how that might help them and some of the things from their perspective with us. Yeah. And we certainly talked about things like compliance. How can we get our residents to be more compliant in that rubbish stream and those rubbish streams? What else can we do around those? And certainly from our perspective, we were impressed with some of the infrastructure. The roads seem to be in pretty good condition. What do they do with their roads? But I think it came down to what was underneath their roads. It's very much a volcanic area, so that volcanic ash or volcanic ground underneath the roads seem to be more stable than some of the soil that we've got. So we probably can't replicate that. But it's all about the exchange of ideas. It's all about making sure we help them and they help us. What can we do? And I have no doubt at all that there'll be some exchanges going on from Kahuku Town residents and some of the residents that were on that particular delegation.
I also probably think here too that listening to you, probably how they go about their problem-solving processes. You know, I reckon that would be interesting. Listening to what you're saying, you know, how they're solving their problems and the way that they're going about that whole process of this is how we're going to solve this problem, and communicating that step-by-step type ideas. That's invaluable, those sort of things.
Well, I think to a large extent the Japanese have this culture of your greater purpose. What should you be doing in life? What is your contribution to society? How can you help your fellow man? And it very much is about looking after your fellow man. And obviously they're very gracious, they're very accommodating. It's all about making sure you're being looked after, everything's okay for you rather than yourself. So it's a very unselfish approach. I don't know how you replicate that, but they learn that. I mean, everywhere's so clean, people don't drop rubbish, but they learn that from when they're born. At home, they learn to keep things clean. Kids clean schools. It's a regular thing where they're just mopping the floors and doing things. Yeah, that's right. But everywhere, even the recycling centres, even the waste disposal centres we went to, they were very clean. I'm looking around, and one of our delegation made mention to the mayor to say the centre where all the rubbish is taken, it looked clean enough inside you could eat your dinner off the floor.
Wow.
It was a rubbish dump, basically. I mean, it was a very fancy rubbish dump, but rubbish dump, and it looked that clean. So how do you change that culture? How do you get people to change? That's a generational thing. I don't know we can do that easily. But, yeah, I think there's lots of learnings there, and I think it's just good to have that international exchange.
Absolutely. Well done. Well, mate, it's been a big one today in welcoming you back here from Japan, and thank you for going through your trip there with us. Of course, it's that time where it's the Limerick of the Week. So I've got a bit of a feeling that your Limerick of the Week this week may have something to do with Japan. Am I right in saying that?
It was, for me, the highlight. And sure, I've given you 20 minutes there, but I could talk for 20 hours about
understandably so.
The things that we did there. So I did do the Limerick this week on Japan, so I'll give that to you now. Now back from the land of the rising sun, the hearts of the delegates had all been won, for in every Japanese face we found a warm embrace, and our journey was second to none.
Well done, well done. Well, folks, that wraps up again for another Straight from the Mayor's Mouth. Until next week, everyone, take care.
Straight from the Mayor's Mouth with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.